People, welcome back to sesh episode 2. I know, so soon, right? But I have so many things to say. This is something you're gonna learn really quick. I always have things to say. I'm a prime time yapper. Literally, so little editing is required for these videos, so I'm gonna keep pumping them out as much as possible. But today is also gonna be another Q&A, sort of related to the French, but like more on the immigration side. A lot of people would always ask me, why am I learning French? And I would say it's for immigration. They're like, oh, so you have to learn French to immigrate to Canada? I'm like, no, but I feel like it's a little bit complicated to explain in just one sitting, so I'm gonna try and do it right now. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a crash course on the Canadian immigration system from the perspective of an international student graduating from a Canadian university. Now, there are other types of streams that happen, like if you're a foreign worker, if you're a refugee, etc. I don't know anything about that. I don't know nothing about those lifestyles, okay? Whatever y'all got going on in there, because that's not me. What I do know is what I went through as an international student. So we'll start from there. So you graduate from a university and you're an international student. What options do you have? What we can do is that we can apply for what's called a postgraduate work permit. A postgraduate work permit is essentially an open work permit that allows you to work at any company or any job for a given amount of time. This is different from a closed work permit, which is what a lot of foreign workers have, that tie them to work at a specific company. That is to say, if they get fired from that job, they going home. But for the postgraduate work permit, you can work anywhere and you can switch jobs if necessary. The catch is that the postgraduate work permit is limited to 3 years. That is to say, after 3 years, if you have nothing else going on, you gotta leave the country. The question then becomes, what happens for me? Now, I graduated in 2023, which means that my postgraduate work permit is expiring in 2026. And if I do not have anything else in the country doing, because my postgraduate work permit is the reason I'm in the country, if I don't have anything else doing in the country by that time, I gotta bounce. And obviously, I don't want to bounce. I love Canada, period, end of story. So the next question is, I need to have a stay in the country, and I can do that by applying for PR, which begs the question, how does one apply for PR? Now, the process itself, it varies. You can either apply at the provincial level or at the federal level. Now, at the provincial level, there's a little less competition because not so many people are applying at that level, but it is way longer and you have to stay in the province that you apply for permanent residency. Whereas the federal level is way faster. They even call it express entry. It's way faster. You can live anywhere you want in Canada, and it's just a easier process almost. The process itself, like I just said, is called express entry, and it's called express entry because it's a little bit faster. But within express entry, there's two categories. There's the foreign worker category, which you do if you are a foreign worker, and then there's the Canadian experience class. The Canadian experience class, or CEC, is essentially designed for people who have Canadian experience, whether it's Canadian education or Canadian job experience or certain knowing Canadian national languages. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So, how does express entry work then? Well, to apply for express entry, you first have to have at least a year of Canadian job experience. So that's number one. But after that, you create a profile in the express entry system, and that profile gets put in a pool with a bunch of other profiles from all the other candidates for the express entry. And then every few weeks, the Canadian government draws and picks a certain number of profiles from the pool to get to apply for permanent residency. This is where a lot of people get confused. Just because you're in the pool doesn't mean that you have applied for permanent residency. You're just saying, I want to apply. And then the Canadian government selects you to make an application. You get an invitation to apply from the Canadian government. That is to say, you've been invited to apply. And this selection of candidates is called a draw, and a draw happens about every 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on the things that are happening in the country. And you then have the opportunity to make your application for permanent residency from there. The question then becomes, how does the Canadian government select profiles from the pool? This is where the CRS score comes in. The CRS score is a score that is based on your sociological and psychological, historical factors. This is to say, what age are you? What jobs have you had? What is your level of education? What languages do you speak? Do you have any siblings that have PR? Do you have any spouses that have PR? All these things calculate into that score, and every profile gets a score based on what you fill in. The draws, therefore, select the candidates in the pool with the highest CRS scores. For example, if the draw does 3,000 candidates, it's going to be the 3,000 candidates with the highest CRS scores. This is where the minimum CRS score concept comes out. This is the score of the person in the last draw who had the smallest score in that pool of selected candidates. For example, if I had a score of like 512 and that's the minimum CRS score, that means that I was selected for PR and I was the 512 is the score of, you know what? You get the idea. You get the idea. Now, the question then becomes, what can you do about your score, and how do those scores actually translate in person? Take me. I'm a graduate, I'm single, I do not got no man, I do not got no siblings that have PR. What the scores do I get? Well, with 2 years of job experience, I get a score of 499. That's 499. Damn, that sounds like a huge ass number. You're chilling. But then you have to remember the minimum CRS scores. So now you check the minimum CRS scores, and they are 510, sometimes 530, depending on the number of people that are done in the draw. So the question then becomes, how does one improve my CRS score? I can't improve my age. I can't feasibly improve my level of education, nor can I really improve my job experience, because that only happens with time. The only things that are really left is to increase my language scores. You catch what I'm drifting? How do the language scores work in the CRS scoring system? Well, you take a language test, and the percentile you get in the language test directly translates to how big of a score you get. So, for example, if I take English, I speak English well. If I get like a high level, like C2 in English, that gives me more points than I get like a C1 or a B2. The interesting thing about it is that the language section also cares about French. That is to say, if you have French language scores, it will increase your points. By how much, will you wonder? Well, you see, I did the math, and turns out that if you speak French at a B2 level, which is about like just a little bit above average, it can give you as much as 60 to 70 points. Let's remember that the minimum CRS scores are from 510 to 530, and I'm at 499, which means my French score, if I do well in French, that takes my score from a 499 to like a 550 or a 560. That's the difference between never getting an application for PR and then getting it the next day. So that is the main reason why I started to learn French, because I needed those scores. And the interesting thing about it as well is that there is a minimum French level that you have to reach to get scores. It's not like, oh, you go in there and you say A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, U, F, G, H, yes, E, G, G. You know what? I think I'm fucking that up. Anyway, you have to reach a minimum speaking level, or minimum like level in all the categories, which is reading, speaking, writing, and listening, that to qualify to get points for it. So that is the level that I was trying to hit. The level is called B2 NCLC level 7. If you know languages, you kind of know that's kind of just like being able to live and work in French is the main goal here. That was really all I've been working for towards the last few months. You know, I did do super well on my test. Like I got like C1, C2, and I only got B2 in my speaking. But it's also a case of, you want to try and aim higher, because if you go in there, you're saying I'm trying to aim for B2, you're always going to make mistakes. So you're going to go fall down. But you know what? This is getting off topic. I hope that you have a better understanding of the immigration system, of the things that international students that are going through and are dealing with. This is why a lot of people talk about draws. We all have this clock that is just going on our head about when does our permit expire, when does all these things expire, and it will literally put your life on pause. So the next time you see one of your international girlies, you need to talk to them. Let them know that you will marry them. And I'm serious. Go marry and get your text history, all that. Anyway, all right. Ciao.